come in. Right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what is a slightly different session for Davos, but one that I feel very passionately about, and I'm absolutely delighted that I've got such a distinguished panel of people who are going to debate some of the issues to do with the modern world and religious faith and the role that faith can play positively or negatively, and also how people from different faiths work and cooperate together. And if I can run you through the order of what's going to happen, we're going to have a short video for 3 minutes. Then I'm going to ask the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Prime Minister Badawi, who I'm really thrilled to have here, and thank you so much, sir, for making up the time to come and be with us and talk about issues that I know are very close to your heart, but also where you've played a major leadership role within the organization of the Islamic Conference. We've got Cardinal McCarrick, who is an immensely distinguished cardinal who used to be the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. So anybody who can handle Washington, D.C., I think is deserving of our respect. Then there is the Ayatollah Mahdi Hadavi, so from the Porch of Wisdom in Iran, and we're absolutely delighted to see you here. And someone has just said, who you should definitely hire as your public relations assistant, that you are the youngest and the best of the religious leaders in Iran, which will probably do you no good at all with many of your fellow religious leaders in Iran, but nonetheless, we are happy to take that as an accurate statement and compliment. There's David Harris here from the American Jewish Committee, which is a body that does an immense amount of work, not just with and for the Jewish community, obviously, but actually philanthropy and work of an immensely powerful and important kind throughout the United States and in different parts of the world. And then absolutely not least, but the last that I come to in alphabetical order, Pastor Rick Warren, who I can tell you from my own personal experience is one of the most inspirational and extraordinary people operating in the faith world, and who is, I think I'm right in saying, has written the best-selling book in America. Is this true? The Purpose-Driven, yeah. So there you go. And anybody who can write a best-selling book on faith is, I think, greatly to be congratulated. So, what we're going to do, therefore, is we're going to have the 3-minute video. Then the Prime Minister is going to start us off with some remarks, and then I will go to each of the panel and ask for some comments. And then we'll have a little bit of an interchange, and then we'll also open it up to discussion and debate from the floor as well, since looking around this room I can see many distinguished people who've had a long-standing interest in this field, and who I know will both be able to offer some good questions and maybe even offer some good answers, since that's always a help. So I don't know who's in charge of the technology. I hope it's not me, but if whoever it is can start the video, then we'll get underway.
I see religion as a quest for meaning and a desire to become fully human.
Because religion seeks to give meaning to our lives, it's bound up with all the components of our understanding of who we are, as individuals, as members of families, of communities, of nations, peoples, even as part of the whole cosmos.
The values of justice, the values of charity, the values of protection of the poor, these are religious values.
Unfortunately, the religious process has always gotten entwined deeply with the political process, and both the forces are using each other for their own ends, which becomes a complex and deadly mix, the pain of which the humanity has seen continuously in these hundreds of years.
There will be no peace so long as there is so much poverty and so much richness. There are so many responsibilities that have to be handled in order to achieve global economic development.
When any nation or any leader says one thing and does another, People see right through it, and they then question your sincerity and your integrity. So our first goal would be to embody our higher principles.
Religion is a powerful force for good. Commitment to ethical framework for life, commitment to social order, to peace and stability.
So we have to go beyond the conventional approach to religion to get to the roots of these religions. We all share the one and only thing, which is peace and stability for all human beings, and free will for all humankind.
Every single one of the major world religions preaches the golden rule. Do not do to others what you would not like them to do to you. And I think the challenge today is for us to implement this globally so that we treat other nations as we would wish to be treated ourselves.
Right. Prime Minister, over to you. Just before you speak concerning, I should say, because I think it's important to emphasize, that although what you have represented here are the Abrahamic faiths, we're aware, of course, that those are not the only faiths in the world, and that there are people of faith who aren't represented here in this platform, but we have to start somewhere. Prime Minister, over to you.
Thank you for Prime Minister Tony Blair. Ladies and gentlemen, and I must congratulate the producer of this short video. It's very interesting indeed in such a...
It's Peter Bisons who's here, actually, I think, is he? Who's one of our young global leaders. Well done.
I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that all faiths preach peace and goodwill and mutual respect. All faiths teach justice, compassion, and assistance for the needy and the unfortunate. All faiths abhor oppression, exploitation, and violence against the innocent. Our faith should therefore unite and not divide us. In fact, in so many multi-religious societies, including my own, people of different faiths flourish alongside each other. Very often, it is not faith which brings us into conflict. It is politics and the pursuit of economic and military power, and the violent reactions they produce. It is often the manipulation of ideology, whether religious or secular. Ladies and gentlemen, no faith, least of all Islam, is against progress and modernization. Indeed, the teachings of Islam are especially attuned to modernization. Islams are explicitly enjoined to pursue knowledge. It is really fulfilling God's command that we seek knowledge, pursue knowledge, and knowledge is the bedrock upon which all progress and development is built. Islam, for Islam, in Islam, work is deemed a form of worship. Modernity is indeed evident in the Muslim world for all those who wish to see. The world's tallest building is now taking shape in Muslim city, Burj Arab or Burj Dubai, the Petronas Twin Towers. These are the tallest buildings in the world. The largest Muslim country, Indonesia, is democracy, and it is also true that Muslim women have become presidents and prime ministers in their own countries. It is also true that many parts of the Muslim world are presently underdeveloped, measured by almost any indices, poverty, illiteracy, health, gender, empowerment, research and development. All the Muslim countries are left behind. Violence and instability plague several countries. The Islamic faith, however, has nothing to do with it. It's not the teaching of Islam that this has happened. It is the weakness of man and the greed of man. That is why this has happened. It is also the distortion of Islamic teachings that have held back progress in some countries. In this situation, the spirit of ijtihad or inquiry is discouraged. Education has been confined largely to theology, and traditional cultural norms and practices that are sometimes confused with religion have taken strong hold. More tellingly are the development in parts of the Muslim world, especially among countries in the heart of Africa and Asia, is caused by scarcity of resources and distance from ports and maritime arteries. Turmoil and instability compound the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, It was the firm resolve to overcome these profound challenges that moved the OIC to launch the Mecca Declaration in December 2005. The declaration is a clarion call for reform and development in every sphere, including the political, economic, and social. It is accompanied by a 10-year program of action to be implemented by members of the OIC. The goal is to bring human development and human dignity to all corners of the Muslim world, in particular to the least developed countries. In economic and social fields, the emphasis is on alleviating poverty, eradicating illiteracy, and enhancing the quality of education, reducing diseases, and expanding trade. Much of the hard work that lies ahead needs to be done by the OIC member countries themselves. Muslims must realize that their future lies essentially in their own hands. But the Muslim world cannot make sufficient progress working just on its own. It can develop faster if it works in particular with the more developed countries of the West. They have the resources and skills to assist the OIC countries. The West will also gain enormously because greater development in the Muslim world will mean a larger market, more trade, and greater peace and stability. I would therefore like to propose a strategic partnership between the Muslim world and the West to help advance the economic agenda of the Mecca Declaration. This partnership can take a concrete shape through the establishment of an institutional platform, the platform that brings together the OIC and the developed nations of the West, provides strategic direction, overview, and coordination of cooperation. Its task could include the mapping of prevailing international and Western support and collaboration, and the identification of further areas of cooperation to advance the economic agenda of the Mecca Declaration. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that a deep and unhealthy divide presently exists between the Muslim world and the West. This is something that has certainly become a source of great concern to all of us. The root causes are political and they need to be addressed, but they should not become an obstacle to productive collaboration in other fields. A strategic partnership between the West and the Muslim world to advance the economic agenda of the Mecca Declaration would be a historic opportunity to help bridge the divide and reconcile the two great civilizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Prime Minister, and thank you also for keeping to time, which my experience of Davos is miraculous almost in itself. Cardinal McCarrick, would you like to say a word or two about how you see the role of faith and modernity and how you think, the Prime Minister's talked about how there can be economic cooperation to further our goals, but talk a little bit about the faith aspect too.
Thank you, sir. It will be no surprise to anyone that I agree with the Prime Minister, basically because we know, those of us who are people of faith, we know that you can't really have modernization without values. And where do the values come from? They come from our religious traditions. Whatever those traditions are, they are traditions that have been important in organizing and arranging the way we live our lives. I think mostly we can look at the religious values under maybe mention three of them, and they're present in what the Prime Minister was saying, and present, I think, what we're all going to be saying. The first thing, the dignity of the human person. That's the basic responsibility of all of us, to look at each other and say, there is dignity there. There is really a person there. There is someone that I should respect, someone that I know I can learn from, someone that I share with his personhood, his humanity. And from the dignity of the human person comes all those other rights. The right to life, the right to have a family, the right to educate your children, the right to be married. All those things are part of it. And the freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion. Because people have a basic right, because they are dignified with that great gift of a family. And then secondly, we go back, I think I quote the Christian scriptures, but basically those are present in just about every scripture of every religion in the world. The the golden rule that was mentioned in the preliminary movie that we saw. The golden rule: treat each other as you would have them treat you. That's where most of this comes from, and it comes because there is a recognition of the dignity of the human family. And then finally, the third one that has its way in there because it's so obvious to all of us: we have to take care of the poor. If we don't take care of the poor, this world will collapse on us. And not just the world will collapse on us, but our own inner lives will collapse on us, because it will mean that selfishness has taken over, and that is not what we need to do. I admit that there are dangers of extremism in every religious body. And this is not what we're talking about when we're saying that religion and religious values are important for modernization, that you can't really have modernization without it. There are extremes, and I go back to the old Greek philosophers who used to say, in medio stat virtus, although that's in Latin, I just realized. In medio stat virtus, virtues in the middle, virtues in the center. And that's where we build out from the center. That's where we try to do these things. I find in the Makkah Declaration that the Prime Minister just cited a very good example of what we are talking about, how in Islam it is appreciated that religion and modernity, religion and growth, religion and catching up to where the rest of the world should be, even the poorer countries. May I just quote a couple of sentences from the Makkah Declaration? One of them says, "More than ever now, we stand in dire need of a fresh vision to turn the tide," and the Ummah, the community of Islam, as Almighty Allah has rightfully ordained, into a guiding beacon and into the source of light that radiates forth science, knowledge, and morality for the benefit of all mankind. Only then will the Ummah, the community, only then will the Ummah be able to rise to the challenge of playing an instrumental, proactive role in the service of humanity and human civilization. And so it is so clear there that the way to go is by using the religious values, by building on them, and by allowing them to guide us in the right moral course. The Gallup organization just did a wonderful study on who speaks for Islam. And they did it from all over the world, and Georgetown University played a role in it. So I'm so happy that that's in Washington, and we're doing those things. And it indicated that the Muslim world is so close to its religion, but sees its religion as part of the foundation stones to build a new future, to build a world in which we can all get together and have peace and move in the right direction. The Holy Father wrote, and I'll end with this, Holy Father wrote a very beautiful letter to Dr. Klaus Schwab, and I think it's on the website so that we can all have a chance to read it. It's a very beautiful letter, and in it the Holy Father looks at development, economic development, and the moving forward in the economic world, and he says that what we always have to recognize, and it's a wonderful twist, I think. What we always have to realize is that there are other stakeholders when a company builds something or begins to develop something, other stakeholders. And this comes from the understanding that we have of religious values which have an effect on our lives. The other stakeholders, three of them. One, the local people. When you build something for someone else, you have to recognize they have to be part of it. They have to have a say in it, and they have to have a profit from it. You can't just go into somebody's country and take everything away. So the first of the other stakeholders is the man who lives there. The second of the stakeholders, an interesting way the Holy Father put it, the second of the stakeholders is the environment. That you have to, when you begin to do economic development, the environment is a very important factor in everything you're going to do. And the third, and I think I'm not surprised the Holy Father said that, the third is the question of peace. That everything you develop has to some way help to the peace of the world. Every economic movement that we have has to be involved with the peace of the world. And working on the same three things we said in the beginning. Number one, the dignity of the human family, so that everyone you work with has to have a chance to make something good out of what you do. Secondly, the environment, that the world we live in. We have an obligation to. And thirdly, for peace, because this is where religion, the worst thing can happen is if religion is used as a terrible evil. And that has happened sometimes. We've seen that. But real religion, true and faithful, as the scriptures tell us, is always a positive movement. And in modernity, in modernization, it will play a part, and a good positive part, so many of us believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cardinal. Thank you. David, before I come to you, this may be complete nonsense, and I know there are many rabbis in the audience, so forgive me if I've got this.
And I'm not one of them.
And I know you're not one of them, but I'm acutely conscious of the fact there are. But I once read somewhere that there was a rabbi, I think, was it Rabbi Hillel, was once asked by somebody, he said, I will accept what you say, provided you can expound the message of the Torah, stood on one leg.
Right.
And he stood on one leg and said, do nothing to others that would be hateful if it were done to you. That is the message of the Torah. Everything else is about commentary, so go and do it. Anyway, over to you. Faith and modernity, though. How do you make, in a world in which faith is obviously often seen as pulling people apart, how do we make it as something that brings people together?
First of all, I want to thank you for this extraordinary opportunity to participate, particularly with people I admire so much. Let me begin perhaps in an unusual way. En route here at the airport, HSBC, which calls itself the world's local bank, as you may have seen, has a set of pictures, 2 pictures per advertisement. But what they do is they indicate that each of the pictures can be interpreted in exactly opposite ways, so that one particular food to some may be disgusting, to others delicious. And what they're really suggesting is that it all depends on who's doing the looking. I'd like to suggest that if we're talking about faith and modernity, we can, in fact, borrow from HSBC. Faith is a value-neutral term, I believe, and so is modernity. I believe it all depends on how one interprets faith. Faith can be uplifting, ennobling, enriching, both for an individual, a community, a nation, a world, and we've heard examples of it from the previous speakers. But let's be honest with ourselves. In the name of faith, much destruction, death, has been caused in the name of faith. In the name of faith, my parents were expelled from countries, and their ancestors before them as well. So it all depends not on faith per se, but on one's interpretation of faith. And therefore we have to talk about, if you will, the conflict within faith. Not just between faiths, but within faiths. And if you look at each of the major religions, both represented here on this dais and elsewhere, I dare say that there is an ongoing, perhaps perpetual conflict within faiths in order to claim the authenticity and the ownership of those faiths. And those of us who have a stake in the outcome, I believe, cannot simply be observers, or for that matter, circuit riders at international conferences, important though they are. We have to be on the ground. And similarly with modernity. Modernity, I would argue, is also value neutral. Modernity can, at least in my judgment, lead to human freedom, human dignity, human development, to the liberation of the mind and the spirit of entrepreneurship and intellectual inquiry. On the other hand, modernity can also lead to new ways to wage war, to new ways to isolate and break up families, to new ways to destroy the environment. And so we have a struggle as well for ownership of what modernity means, and not simply allow others to define it for us, or to assume that we're all on the same page from the get-go. And then, of course, we have the potential tension between faith and modernity. From my perspective, in order for the two to coexist as they must, and for each to achieve the ennobling effects that can be generated both from faith and for modernity, we need to defend a certain set of values. In fact, we could begin and end with Prime Minister Blair's reference to, in this case, the Hebrew Bible, but it's a shared vision. Love thy neighbor as thyself. In fact, one could ask, what more does one need than those 5 words? What one needs, in fact, is the implementation of those 5 words and not the discussion surrounding them. But we haven't yet been able to figure out how to implement those 5 words. And so we continue, after thousands of years, to struggle over how to achieve a better world. I believe that for faith and modernity to coexist and to draw out the best in each other, 1, societies need to defend freedom of faith. Not for some, not hierarchically, but for all and equally. And in this respect, I must say, while the United States may be an imperfect society, a permanent work in progress, I think that the fact that religion flourishes as it does in the United States is in no small measure due to this protection of freedom of faith and the avoidance of hierarchy in the construction of the relationship between religion and society. But secondly, in order for faith and modernity to coexist, I believe, one also needs freedom from faith. This is no less important. I need to be sure that my faith is protected every bit as much as everyone else's is, or indeed, if I have no faith, that too is protected. What I don't need is an attempt by others to impose their faith on me, much less through the political, legislative, or judicial tracks. This, it seems to me, ultimately not only does a disservice to politics, but ultimately inevitably corrupts religion, which becomes, at the end of the day, the worst victim of the intersection between religion and state when it becomes too formalized. Thirdly, I believe that societies need to be based on the principle of mutual respect. Too often we hear the word tolerance thrown around. It's a word that at least I reject. It's too weak. I don't want to simply tolerate others on this panel, nor would I like to be tolerated. I would like to respect others in this panel for their faith or absence of faith, as I would hope they would respect me. But this means, in essence, the construction of societies that are based on the principles both of democracy and pluralism, in which we're taught to respect one another, that the total becomes greater than the sum of its parts, because all of us, whatever our faith, whatever our interpretation of our faith, enriches the larger collective. And fourthly, I believe that for faith and modernity to coexist, those of us who believe in the ennobling principles of both have to be on the side of human freedom, have to be on the side of human dignity, and have to be on the side of human development. It's not enough to preach faith, nor is it enough to invoke modernity. We have to bring out the best in each of us to summon us all to a larger calling. And so my final point is that words are cheap. As someone once said, when all is said and done, much more is said than done. My organization, the American Jewish Committee, has tried to match deeds to words for decades. People like Cardinal McCarrick know it well because we've been partners in the vineyards on so many important issues, the central one of which has been to try and write a new chapter in the history of Catholics and Jews against a very, very difficult backdrop. I think we've succeeded spectacularly in the 20th century, which I think not only serves the interests of both Catholics and Jews, but serves as a potential model for other faiths. So let me end with this. After the devastation wrought by Hurricane Katrina in the southern part of the United States a couple of years ago, our members raised money in order to support rebuilding efforts. We asked ourselves, how could we leverage those limited funds to maximum effect and at the same time show our belief in what we Jews call B'Tselem Elohim, the notion that all of us are created in the image of God. And so what we did was decide to rebuild damaged houses of worship. And we picked two in particular, a synagogue and a Catholic church, opposite each other in New Orleans and sharing a parking lot. And if you visit today in New Orleans, you will see the Gates of Prayer Synagogue and St. Clement's of Rome, both rebuilt with funds from the American Jewish Committee. Now, the reality is that most of us will never enter St. Clement's of Rome to pray. But what we were trying to affirm in that gesture, and it's one of several I could cite, was simply the fact that words only have meaning if they're attached to deeds. And in moments like that, whether it was natural destruction or man-made destruction, people of goodwill, irrespective of their faith, must stand together and work together to affirm that fundamental belief that we are all created in the image of God. Otherwise, unlike what the lady said in the film at the beginning, faith will not be a force for good. Faith could be a force that ultimately destroys us in the 21st century. None of us can afford it. There is no second planet. Space on this planet is finite. And unless we find the ability to overcome our differences, respecting our differences, collaborating where possible across religions and national boundaries, then I fear that indeed it will be a calamitous century. And I, for one, as a citizen and as a parent, refuse to stand idly by with that prospect at hand.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Thank you, David. Ayatollah Hadavi, how do you see this from your perspective, faith and modernity, what Islam can teach to and learn from the rest of the world of faith?
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, I'd like to look at the issue from another aspect. I'd like to just mention a preliminary step that maybe at the end of 19th century, some of the thinkers, they were thinking that it's the time that there will be no role for religion. In the middle of 20th century, there was still thinkers that they were thinking so. Maybe when Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher, who was delivering his lecture in his last birthday anniversary, and he was talking about the religion, he was never thinking that someday the prime minister, former prime minister of his country will be here to participate in an interfaith dialogue, or Prince Charles will be awarded for his efforts in interfaith dialogue. Because they were thinking that modernity will come and human being will be fulfilled by modernity, by technology, and there is no need for religion. But something else happened. Now we are witnessing the fact that religion is growing up and nobody can control this growth. It is growing up and it is feeling more and more role in different issues. And now we are here because we think that it is necessary to think about religion, to think about faith, to think about spirituality once more, and to see if there is any contradiction between faith and modernization, between spirituality and modernization. In my point of view, there is no contradiction. Of course, it depends on your interpretation. Some false interpretation about modernization or some false interpretation about faith has reached to this conclusion that there is a contradiction between them. But I think there is no contradiction between faith and modernization. There are some values, they are called modern values. I think the issue of modernization should be separated from some of the values that have been grown up besides modernization, but they are not really the values of modernization. Because modernization can be used, can be amplified in different issues with faith or without faith. You can be a secular person and a modern person, and you can be a faithful person and a modern person. There is no contradiction between faith and modernization. And I think the thing that was important in the beginning, and maybe the first glance was showing so, was that modernization is changing everything, while faith and religion depends on sacred, permanent issues and factors, and modernization is changing everything. Nothing is permanent, nothing is sacred. But after a while, human being has reached to this, that he needs some permanent sacred issues, because there is a spiritual side dimension in his life. And therefore, we now witness that human being throughout the world, globally, is looking for faith. Of course, this is, I think, a critical examination for all the religions. All of us, we are claiming that we have the best religion, where we can show the best solutions for all the contemporary issues. We are all saying so. We are all claiming so. But the critical point is that how much can we take care of the concepts and values which have been introduced, introduced in our religion with the issues in modernity? There was some solutions, of course, that some of the people, they put faith, they put religion away from so many issues that there are the issues of modernity. And then they reach to a combination between faith and modernization. But in this combination, there is only a coexistence between faith and modernization. They have their own fields. They have their own borders. In this case, you may lose a lot of main concepts and values of the religion. While if you can find the solution in a way that you can reach to a real combination between faith and modernization, you will be able to introduce some patterns, some new style of life, that it is a modern, faithful life. And I do believe that it depends on the way that you look at modernization and you look at the issue of religion and belief and the faith. And it depends on the religion. As I said, it is a critical examination for all the religions to show their ability, how they can manage, how they can administrate the social, political issues. I can say the humanistic issues based on faith in this modern world. If we can produce some new ideas in this field, if we can find some new patterns, then we have been successful in this. And I think, of course, it is my own point of view, that we have done a lot in Iran in this field, and we have tried a lot. I have been activist in different fields, in economics, in medicine, in different issues, to find contemporary solutions based on Islamic values and to reach to some conclusions which are Islamic and modern. And I think this is the most important issue, that we should pay attention to it. And of course, there are some misunderstandings about religion and misunderstandings about modernization. There are extremists in faithful side and in modern side. We have extremists in faithful side, and you know them well. And there are also extremists in modern side, the people that they are emphasizing on some values that they think that they are the modern values, while they are not. And they have, some of them, they have been rejected by all of the religions, but they are insisting on them. And I believe that they are the extremists of modernization or the extremists of secularism. And I do believe that all the problems throughout the world, all the crises throughout the world, is because of these extremists, that they are playing the role. Unfortunately, they are in power and they are playing the role. And unfortunately, When they come down from the power, they change their direction. They become moderate. But when they are in power, they are radical, they are extremist. And if we can control them, we will be able to control the global issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayatollah Hadavi. And now, Rick, and I think also, if I might just push you this question as well, which is about why faith in the modern world as well, because I think this is, in a sense, quite an important thing, because there will be a lot of people who would say, yeah, okay, we agree with all these values, but why faith?
Is that a softball question or what?
I know that you can handle anything, so I'm giving you that.
First, I applaud Davos for having this session. And I applaud you for coming to it. It really says more about you than it does about us. If you are a global business leader, you need to understand that the future of the world is not secularism. It is religious pluralism. You may not like that, but you're going to have to deal with it. The world is becoming more religious, not less. The myth that as education rises, religion would go down is that literally a myth. And if you happen to be in a country where either houses of worship are not strong, you have no idea of the vitality of faith around the world and see how influential it really is. There are major problems on our planet. I call them the global giants. They affect not millions of people, but billions of people. Pandemic diseases, extreme poverty, illiteracy, corruption, global warming, spiritual emptiness. We cannot solve these problems without involving people of faith and their religious institutions. It isn't going to happen any other way. On this planet, there are about 20 million Jews. There are about 600 million Buddhists. There are about 800 million Hindus. There are over 1 billion Muslims. And there are 2.3 billion Christians. If you take people of faith out of the equation, you've ruled out 5/6 of the world. And if we only leave it up to secular people to solve these major problems, it isn't going to happen. Now, I've been coming to Davos for some time, and we always talk about partnerships. And I'm in favor of partnerships, but we've been missing the third leg of the stool. When we talk about partnerships at Davos, we basically talk about public and private, or public being government and non-government organizations, and private meaning the for-profit organizations. A one-legged stool will fall over, and a two-legged stool will fall over. You have to have 3 legs. And the third leg of the stool are the people representing faiths on this stage and others. It is the faith component. Government has a role that only government can do. Prophet has a role that only prophet can do. And churches and mosques and synagogues and temples have a role that only they can do. There's some things that churches have. Let me just take my own faith as a Christian pastor. Let me give you some things that government or business will never have that the church has. Number one, we have universal distribution. I could take you to 10 million villages around the world, and the only thing in it is a church. They don't have a school, they don't have a business, they don't have a church, a program, they don't have a fire department, they don't have any government, but they got a church. The church was global 200 years before Davos even started talking about globalization. It is truly the only global organization. It speaks more languages than the United Nations. It's in 1,000 more people groups than the UN. It is the only truly global organization. So we have universal distribution, and we have used this in disaster relief very effectively. I lead a very small network of about 500,000 churches in 162 countries. That's one little network compared to the Catholic Church, which, if you go to Africa, 30% of the health care done on that continent is done by the Catholic Church. You can't ignore that. You take the Catholic Church out of Africa, you've just lost the #1 provider of health care on that continent. So we have universal distribution. The second thing we have is we have the largest pool of manpower. Not accounting all of brothers and sisters who are Jews and Muslims and other faiths, Hindus, Buddhists. If I could just get 1/2 of Christianity involved in these major conflicts, that'd be 1 billion people. Hundreds of millions of people serve through their congregation every week at no cost. No government and no business will ever match the commitment of volunteers to faith. None, ever. You need to understand that as a business leader. The third thing that we have is we have local credibility. Last year I did a world tour where I did 46,000 miles in 45 days. And in every country, I literally went around the world. In every country I met with the government leaders, usually the president, the prime minister, the top business leaders, and the religious leaders. And in every one of those countries, what I found is when you get down to the local city level, the credibility lies with the imam, the pastor, the priest, the rabbi. Why? Because that person is marrying, bearing, they're there in the seasons of life, they care for the sick, they help the people. When the wars come, everybody else leaves, all the NGOs pull out, but the church and the mosque stays. Why? It is the community. You can't talk community development without talking about churches and mosques and temples and synagogues. You just can't talk about it because they are the community. So my challenge to you is, can we not all get along? Can we not just work together? I don't have to share your motivation, and you don't have to share mine for us to work on things like poverty, disease, and illiteracy and things like that. Frankly, I don't care why you do good, as long as you do good. Now, there's some people who do good for a political reason. I happen to be on the Council of Foreign Relations in America, and we've learned that when you help people with health care in a country, they tend to like your country. You help people get well, they like you. Now, that's not my motivation, but it's a good motivation. I don't have a problem with political motivation, helping people get well, and they like your country, fine. You may have a profit motivation. You may be a pharmaceutical and say, we're going to make drugs, and we're going to do good and make money at the same time. Great. I wish more companies would do that. I wish they'd make profit and do good at the same time. It's not my motive, but it's not a bad motive. You may have a personal motivation. Say, well, I had cancer, so I care about people who have cancer. Or I have AIDS, or I care about people who have AIDS. That's fine. My motivation is I have a Savior named Jesus Christ who said, love your neighbor as yourself. That doesn't have to be your motivation. It has to be mine. But can we not work together in building the three legs of the stool? For the last 3 years, I've been working on a prototype of this. It's called the Peace Plan, P-E-A-C-E. Promote reconciliation, equip ethical leaders, assist the poor, care for the sick, educate the next generation. In my own church, I've had over 7,700 of my members overseas in 68 countries doing this peace plan. We learned 1,000 ways that don't work, but we learned a few dozen that do. And we are learning how to work with businesses and how to work with governments and how to work with churches and mosques. I'll end with this story. In last December, I was asked by President Bush to be the closing speaker at the Global Summit on Malaria. And I said, I want to just show you why we cannot eliminate malaria, much less any other problem, without houses of worship. Let me just show you one example. So I said, I'll show you 3 slides. And I put up the first PowerPoint slide, and it was a slide of Western Rwanda. I said, there are 700,000 people in this province. Here are the 3 hospitals, and I pointed them out on the map. Only 3 hospitals for 700,000 people. It's a 2 days walk to any hospital. That means if you get sick, you got to walk over mountains for 2 days. 2 of those hospitals are faith-based, and 1 of them is secular. It's government-based. So you wouldn't even have 2/3 of that without, faith. And then I said, let me show you this. And I showed them the 18 clinics in the Western province. And I said, it's still a day's walk to any of these clinics. And some of those clinics means I've just got a bottle of aspirin on the shelf. That's it. 16 of those clinics were faith-based, actually church-based, and 2 of them were government-based. Then I said, watch this. And I threw up a map with dots all over the map, dot, 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 everywhere. I said, here are the 726 churches in this province. If you're sick, let's say you have AIDS, where would you like to get your ARVs? After it was over, Melinda Gates came up to me. She says, I get it, Rick. Houses of worship are the distribution center for all we need to do. And that's what we need to partner on. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Rick. Thank you. Now, we have got, because we have time constraints, as we always do in Davos. I think we've got, is it about 10 minutes to a quarter of an hour? Who's my timekeeper here?
Hand going up over there.
You're my timekeeper, is that right? So,
ouch.
Right. Now, I'm going to take one or two questions. If we keep the questions or the comments very brief, and if people would say who they are, and then I'm just going to field them around to our panel here as they come. And I'd like, if I might, this may mean your hands all go down, I think it's important to focus on, one, how we get faiths actually working together on the same lines, and two, this question about why faith in the modern world? Why is that so important? Yes, sir. Take it. Yes, sir. There.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'd like to applaud each and every one of you sitting on the stage and sharing such a thoughtful process with us. I don't see any Hindu on the stage, and I don't see any Buddhist on the stage, but that's okay.
Next time.
Next time, absolutely. Hearing what this, and I've read your book, Rick, it's a great book. I think the main, or one of the fundamental problems that all of us have, whether I'm a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu, is that, and we all talk about the same thing. Each and every one of you use the same thing. Love yourself as, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But we do not communicate. Probably just we are using different languages, different sign languages, different way of saying it, different way of probably presenting it and saying it. How can we create that communication process so interfaith becomes one integrated process versus silos individually?
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll tell you what I'll do, actually, because I think this is the easiest way to do it for time. We'll take a few, when I take a range of questions, and then we can, because we'll probably then have... There was, yes, the lady there?
Applauding all of you. My name is Leslie Ann Knight. I'm from Caritas International in Rome. Like you, Rick Warren, I bring together 164 Catholic organizations around the world. We will be hearing in these next few days here, as has already started this morning, very strongly from Bono and Al Gore, how unforgivable it is going to be for the international community to miss the Millennium Development Goals. And we will be hearing that it is unforgivable, particularly because it's because of a lack of financial commitment, or at least the richer nations keeping to their commitments. Could I say how I feel it's going to be unforgivable for the richer nations of the world to ignore the potential that we are and we represent as faith groups in bringing about those Millennium Development Goals too? Can we not come together as faith groups to bring that about for the poor of our world? An example to just illustrate that, we are responsible just across Africa for 1/5 of all the care of HIV/AIDS patients, of those who are going to be dying over the next few years. Within the UNAIDS, we receive just 3% of the funding. Can we not turn that around? Can we not bring that about? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, sir, over there. I'm going to take another two after this one, and then I think it's...
Sébastien Maillard from the French Catholic daily La Croix. A question to the panel about faith and modernization. What should be the role of the state to reconcile, what kind of collaborative innovation should the state have to reconcile faith and modernization? I'll give you a quick ongoing example in France right now, the opening of shops on Sundays. A state both has the will to support the economy while doing this, and at the same time it has to support family life, and there's a big dilemma there. So what should be the role of the state to reconcile faith and modernization?
Thank you, sir. And then, yes, at the Yes, you, sir.
Yes, thank you. I would like to address to Warren. I'm one of the 138 signatories of a Common Word document based on love between believers and especially between Christians and Muslims. And I know you have undersigned a response. And as I am being appointed to follow up this issue with the Vatican, I wanted to know what your suggestions on this common word practically could give, not only for the dialogue between Muslims and Christians, but also with Jews and with other believers as well in the West. Thank you.
At the front here, and then the lady there, and then that's it. I'm afraid, because otherwise we're going to be right out of time. Actually, the gentleman here, and then the lady behind. One of the ladies.
I'm a rabbi from Holland, and I'm only here because I was saved by a Catholic woman who was German in '43 in Holland. And I'm now hearing and knowing we need each other. All the faith communities, we need each other. And we have a tremendous responsible opportunity, as this morning was said about the Millennium Development Goals. But in Bono and Al Gore together, there's also the now conviction that only the struggle against poverty and the protection of the earth have to go hand in hand. And as Al Gore said, we have to have a taxation on carbon emissions. We have to come to a voluntary taxation of ourselves. We have to do so many things in order to preserve all life. And the only way we can do this is by a change of heart. And the only way we can bring this change of heart now is by the faith communities facing its own extremists in its midst and working together in hearing the quiet voice of God, which will change the earth into paradise.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. You, madam, have the very last word from the audience. This lady here, absolutely behind. Yes, there we are.
Hi, I'm from Chicago, and I think in the modern world, modernity is actually leading to selfishness at the state level, at the country level, and at the individual level. And I would like to hear how faith can help people to become less selfish, because eventually when you become less selfish is when you can look at your neighbor and say, how can I help my neighbor, and treat my neighbor just as the way I would like to be treated. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, this is a completely impossible task, but you're all extraordinarily brilliant people. So we are within you just answer whichever point out of those, because if you try answering all of them, it's going to be absolutely impossible. Anyway, Prime Minister, we'll offer concluding thoughts.
Well, I like to respond this way, that the best thing that we have done, but with a lot of difficulties, is how to put people together, people who believe in different faiths, people who believe in Muslim, Christianity, who believe in Buddhism, who believe in Hinduism, taking into account that politics is the most dominant, the strongest of all factors. Therefore, what we do is to create an alliance of 14 political parties, not easy to manage, Tony, an alliance of 14 political parties that represent practically all the religions in Malaysia and all the ethnic groups in Malaysia. And we form a government, the government that works on the basis of power sharing, that deals with all sorts of problems, and a government like any government. And we decide that on anything, especially policies, we decide on the basis of consensus, not by show of hand, so that the minority will not be alienated from the decision which is a consensus. And this is the Malaysian government that has existed for 50 years. If the government has been returned to power every time with a mandate of more than 2/3 in all the general elections that have taken place. We have to deal with the problems, religious problems. All of us has to be tolerant. We have to deal with the economic deprivation, with the economic disparity, with the poor of all religions without any discrimination. Eradication of poor is irrespective of race and religion. We have to provide education for all. And at all the time we have to be tolerant, we have to be moderate, we have to be tolerant, we have to recognize that everyone needs to be respected. Everyone has strong faith in their own religion. But everybody says that they know that their faith, their religions do not teach them to fight one another, to fight against a person or persons who belong to another faith. So this feeling of that we must respect, we must be moderate, we must be tolerant, that others can be different from us, ethnically different, believe in religion that could be different. This is what we believe. I'm not saying there are no problems. There are problems, plenty of problems, but we stick to ourselves. We have one faith that all of us believe in ourselves to do the good for others, for our country, and for mankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Cardinal.
Real quickie. Do you remember, nobody here is as old as I am. Do you remember the old song, All We Need Is Love? And you know, we used to look at that and say, oh, that's one of those crazy songs. It doesn't mean, it means a lot. It really means something. All we need is love. And not just the love that is, oh, I love you, but the love that shows itself in action. The love that brings those thousands and thousands of people that Rick Warren sends around the world. The love that we've seen in what the Ayatollah does. The love that we've seen in Malaysia, just the Prime Minister just telling. The love that we all have. The love of the Jewish community. The love that I see everywhere in the churches, Catholic, Protestant, and whatever around the world. The love that's so apparent in the tremendous generosity of the Jewish people in our country. There's love around, and it's love that counts. And so we've got to make sure that we are people who love. How do you love? You love because there's the dignity of the human family. You love because the person you're dealing with is Mother Teresa used to say, is the Lord Himself. So you know that song it ain't all bad. You know, there's a lot in it, and that's what we have to do to make it work.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
That great theologian John Lennon.
I think that one of the underlying and overarching answers to several of the questions that was asked is that if we see each other as the other, or even worse, if we don't know each other, then we more easily succumb to stereotypes or even demonization. And again, let's be frank. There are some religious leaders in different religious faiths who, in seeking to affirm their own faith and its authenticity and legitimacy, also go the extra step by seeking to deny other people their faith with its legitimacy and authenticity. I don't think we can keep going like this without rubbing up against each other and spawning the kind of hatred that we're all here to try and solve. And so, frankly speaking, I think it's up to us to hold the clergy's feet to the fire of whatever faith. That we insist that we affirm what is beautiful in our own traditions, while at the same time refusing to denigrate other faith traditions by suggesting that they are illegitimate or consigned to some kind of evil end. That's what we're up against. And that's why I believe at the end of the day, we need to know each other. And there are certain societies which are energetically pluralistic, and there are other societies which, for whatever reason, are not. And in those latter societies in particular, we need to create opportunities externally to bring young people together, especially young people together. Let them find that even if faith divides, soccer unites. Maybe not in the United States. There might be football. 1. 2. After the Second World War, the American Jewish Committee undertook a series of 5 volumes under the rubric The Authoritarian Personality. It became a very important examination of what could lead to the Nazi era. But years later, we began to discover what the rabbi spoke about briefly, that he himself was saved by a Christian family. And so we commissioned a second study, the flip side, called the Altruistic Personality. And we looked in particular at what motivated people during the Second World War to risk their own lives, to save the lives of people that in most cases they never knew. Denmark being perhaps the classic example. And the bottom line of the study was very simple, that those families that saved others never saw the others as other. They were raised in families, communities, schools, churches, wherever, to believe that we were all part of the same human family. Though these were Jews, they weren't being rescued necessarily as Jews, but simply as neighbors, as fellow citizens, as fellow Danes. And thirdly, as a symbol of hope, let me leave you with this. In 1999, Slobodan Milosevic, as you all know, unleashed his terror against Kosovo and drove out hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees to neighboring Macedonia, Albania, and other countries. We were horrified by what we saw. And again, we wanted to match deeds to words. We traveled to Macedonia and we visited several of the refugee camps, some run by faith groups, others run by governments. One that particularly impressed us was run by the German government. And so we had an idea. We asked ourselves, what would it mean in 1999 for the American Jewish Committee to partner with the German armed forces, the Bundeswehr, to rescue and assist Muslim refugees from Slobodan Milosevic's Serbia? And we worked together with Joschka Fischer and other German leaders who embraced the idea. We raised money, and we used German Air Force transport planes to bring relief purchased by us in the United States to assist Muslim refugees living in camps in Macedonia. I don't say this to pat ourselves on the back. I say this instead as a metaphor for the triumph of hope over despair. If 50 years after the Second World War, Jews and Germans in uniform can collaborate together to assist Muslim refugees simply because we believe that we are all one family, then we should leave this hall, I believe, with a measure of hope that it is in our hands to change this world.
Thank you. Ayatollah and Rick, we got 1 minute because I've got to go to do the next session. And
we can share it in a few minutes. I just like to emphasize that I think the answer to many questions is that extremism is the source of all the problems. If you're talking about the issue of selfishness, it is because of an extremist interpretation about modernization that thinks that capitalism or secularism are the fruits, are necessarily the fruits of the modernizations. And I think we have begun a lot of sayings and a lot of talks about interfaith dialogue, especially during these recent years. I have been in different international seminars in different countries. We gathered more than 8,000 people in Barcelona in 2004. We talked a lot about the interfaith dialogue, but I think that we need more cooperation. And I think this session will end just a few minutes later, but it is not the end, it is the beginning. We should change the situation in a way that we can, I mean the moderate side, the people that they are rational enough to think about the issues rationally, they should control the issues and they should change the situation that now they are existing in it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Final word, Rick.
All right, I got 1 minute, and I'll answer 4 questions with like one word. The question over here was, what is the government's role? One role, freedom of religion, promote freedom of religion. The person over here who asked about the millennial goals, I met last month with Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to talk about faith-based organizations working with the UN on this. And later you should talk to Tony Blair, who's just formed a foundation. He's much too humble to talk about it on this very issue. To my brother, Islamic brother here from Italy, I would say, I'm not really interested in interfaith dialogue. I'm interested in interfaith projects. We got enough talk. So 2 weeks ago, or a few weeks ago at Georgetown University, we brought in 3 imams, we brought in 3 Catholic priests, we brought in 3 evangelical pastors, and we brought in 3 rabbis, and we said, what can we do about AIDS? And we started on some common ground on those issues. What can we do that we all care about? And Tony, on your question on why is faith growing, there are 8 answers to that, and I don't have time, but it's depersonalization is one of them, and fragmentation, and the fact that materialism and hedonism is ultimately an empty lifestyle. People are looking for meaning, they're looking for purpose in life. When I wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and you asked about selfishness, the opening sentence of The Purpose-Driven Life is 4 words, it's not about you. That is the most counterculture statement you can make. And it became the best-selling book in English in world history. It's next to the Bible, it's the best-selling book, and it's the most translated. It's the most translated book next to the Bible, over 100 languages. And what is that? It's because fundamentally people know it isn't about us. It's about something bigger than selfishness.
Right. Thanks very much, all of you. You've been absolutely excellent. And now, as an interesting aside, I'm off to chair the session on the Middle East peace process.